Hi, I'm Griffin Cipriani, and this is Cooking Wild. This is a project where I will be cooking with wild game that I harvested myself. And so why? Number one, I love the outdoors and connecting with nature. And fishing as hunting is something I've cherished my entire life and worked really hard at. Harvesting your own meat is a great way to boycott animal abuse in the food industry. And it's non-GMO and no added hormones, so there's nothing added to feed or anything because they're just grazing on the grass that they would find in the wild. And then in college, I would love the ability to cook because it's something that's super valuable and something I've kind of wanted to do for a while. Aspects of my project. So first, I'll be trying to research big game licenses and tags and seasons and stuff because different animals, such as pigs, for example, are considered an invasive species. So their hunting season is year-round. Unlike deer, which the hunting season is only about a month, it's in November. And then acquiring the necessary gear was something I had to do. I had most of it already, but there's a lot of stuff like the pig hunt, new camos, ammunition, stuff like that. Finding land on which to hunt and actually fish on is really difficult just because there's a lot of people kind of in California and a lot of the public land is super busy. So, and especially if you want to increase your odds, trying to find some private land near that usually means getting a guide. So that can also be kind of difficult. The hunt itself, and then we'll go on to processing the animal into usable cuts of meat, researching and modifying kind of recipes, because I don't know, I'll explain later in the video, but I kind of wanted to make a little bit the meal's kind of my own, not exactly what I found online. And shopping for any extras, so vegetables, sauces, stuff like that I would need to make my meals. And then cooking, so I was getting my culminating event, which was cooking a pasta dish for all my coworkers. So that would be my community aspect and my culminating event, but it didn't quite work out because of COVID-19. And then my goal. So my goal is to do something that I love, which is hunt and fish, but also tie that into a useful skill. And especially with kind of college rolling up, I think it's something super important that I should learn and can help me for the rest of my life. So some of the necessary gear that I had to go through, this is kind of the basics. Licenses and tags. So this is my hunting certification from when was it? It was 2017, but then I actually got one of my most recent tags. This was for the boar hunt that I did. This is the tag for that. Here is the gun I was using, and here's the vest. And then so we need firearms, ammunition. So certain firearms, ammunition, like shotguns, are a little closer range, but if you want to go a little farther, you need rifles, but then certain bullets can dump certain amounts of energy, and I don't know, different stuff like that I had to kind of go into. But I ended up going with a .308 caliber AR-10 with a 10-round magazine. But yeah, and then we go on to the rope, binoculars, multiple sets of knives, and of course, the sandwich. But the reason we kind of do the multiple sets of knives is because when you are processing the animal, your knives dull very quickly, and the last thing you want to do is get your hands covered in all sorts of gross stuff and then cut yourself. So yeah, and then for fishing, I got my fishing pole, tackle, live bait, waders, multi-tool, and nets. And then tackle and live bait are kind of different because tackle is metal and plastic lures and stuff, where live bait might be worms or minnows or something like that. And then waders are kind of they're kind of like waterproof overalls that will go all the way down and connect to your boots, and then go all the way up to your chest, so you can walk in water up to the top of your waders. So when you're fishing in a stream, you can kind of walk out through the shallower parts and get to the deeper holes. And then, yeah. So my first hunt was just at the end of last year. This was in Zoar Valley, New York. It was my whitetail hunt. And so first, kind of what we did when we get there is we scouted out the land a few days before the hunt, so we kind of know what we're dealing with. And that also gives us a chance to make a blind, which is something that you make from the natural cover around you. So it's almost like a little shelter to keep your movement and you kind of camouflaged. But the goal is to try to use tree branches and bushes and stuff that's around that area so it looks really natural. And then I kind of learned how to stalk. So one thing that I learned is really important is when I first thought of stalking, you want to step on your tippy toes, but what I learned is super important is to actually start from your heel and roll to your toe. So if you start to feel your foot rolling over a branch, you can stop and either curl your toe and kind of go over it, or pull back off it so you don't break it. And then exercise patience. One thing that I actually happened in this hunt was, so the first day I actually sat there for 11 hours in the same spot in my blind and I didn't see anything. But then the second day, I only sat in the blind for about 3 hours in the morning, and then kind of came out and we started walking the property, my dad and I, who I was hunting with. And we started walking the property, and that's when we saw our first deer, and that was the one that I shot. And one thing when I say exercise patience is I didn't really have a super clean shot because the deer was kind of facing away from me. But my dad said, hold on, wait for the better shot. And even though it was walking away from me, I wanted to shoot it, but I couldn't, because I'm like, no, I can wait for a better shot. And then with patience, it actually turned broadside to me, which is where I can kind of hit the vitals, which are the lungs. It's right behind the shoulder. It's the lungs and the heart. And yeah, and for vitals, field dress I learned. So that starts all the way from the back side, you slice all the way up the belly. And then, so there's two cavities. You have the kind of where your lungs and heart are, and then your stomach, and then all your lower intestines and stuff like that. But something that was really unique that I was kind of surprised, actually, with white-tailed deer, you have to break the pelvis bone. So you put your knife down on the pelvis bone and get a rock and have to smash through it so you can keep the large intestine intact, so you don't have to get any more gross than you are. And yeah, and it was kind of nice because it was below freezing outside, so we're actually able to hang the meat outside. We're able to hang the meat outside and make sure that it stayed fresh. And then, yeah, and then refuse the celebratory beer, which is the neighbors wanted to offer me one, but I had to decline. And then here, I think it already played, but here's just a video of some deer tracks. So in the snow, they're super easy. They look like two fingers kind of going into the snow. And that in the snow is just not only for tracking deer footprints, but also blood. Blood shows up really easy on the snow, and especially when tracking a deer, it's difficult. What you want to do is, or any wounded animal that you're trying to find, is when you find a blood patch, mark it or somehow know exactly where it is before you go and try to find the next one, because if you try to go find another one and lose the one you just had, then you lost your blood trail. Alright, here's some graphic images. You guys can look away if you don't want to see them, but I'll verbally tell you when you can look again. So here's just us when we were dragging the deer out, another one we were dragging the deer out, and then these are just the two that are hanging. And that's my dad and that's me. Alright, you're free to look now, you're good again. Alright, so this is our wild boar hunt. I actually went with my buddy Ethan, and this was up in, it was, I think, 15 or 20 miles east of Redding, so just up north in Northern California. We actually went on a guided hunt, so this is, again, we could get that kind of private property where it was a lot more secluded and a little bit nicer of a hunt, and especially because we had a guide. And so me and Ethan actually flipped a coin at the beginning of the hunt, and that coin, the coin toss, he won, so he ended up getting first shot, and we hunted for 3 days, but he ended up actually not getting a shot until the very last day in kind of the evening time, and he missed. So it was my turn. We only had about 2 hours left, but I got very lucky because I think within probably an hour of him missing, we actually walked up on a couple other pigs, and I was able to take one at about 110 yards. So it actually worked out pretty well. And so some of the big things that I learned were how to spot and stalk, or I say spot and marathon, because what we normally do is we get up in a kind of a high place, like in that photo, and we'd be spotting 600, 700, 800 yards away, and you'd see kind of herds of pigs kind of moving. And so once we spotted them, we pretty much had to run to them. So not only did we have to run to them till we were, maybe 100, 200 yards away, and then we'd start to creep and slowly kind of work our way in. But, and then that also kind of went into like their feeding and bedding habits I had to learn about, and it was really difficult. So it's kind of like the thing where fishing's better in the evening, so dawn and dusk. Same thing with hunting, at least for wild boar, but this is because during the night they feed, and during the day they kind of bed down, and because it's really hot, they don't want to waste a lot of energy and stuff. But between those times, when they're bedding and feeding, when they move, like a lot of times when deer move, they'll kind of keep their head up, they'll walk a few steps, keep their head up, kind of look around, so it makes them easy to kind of walk up on. But pigs, what they do is when they go from one place to another, they put their heads down and they just run, and they don't stop. So when you do see them, you have to run after them. But that was kind of something very interesting, and reminded me how unin shape I was. And then we learned how to field dress the pig, so that was really interesting. It was, for the most part, pretty much the same as the deer, where you start down low, go up the belly, and then open them up. But we didn't have to break the pelvis, and although Ethan did have to cut out the anus, that was pretty funny. But yeah, so that was really interesting. We also learned how to skin it, which I was unaware of. So what we actually ended up doing was cutting off the hooves, and then you actually take, I think it was the Achilles tendon on the legs, and you kind of put meat hooks up through them, and we actually were able to hang it. And then I'll show you that on another photo after this, but I'll give you another warning. And it was pretty interesting because it's almost like the hide was like a giant sock, and you just kind of pull it down off of them, and as you go, you can make little cuts with your knife just in case it catches anywhere. And then meat hates water, so like one thing I also learned is that we had our meat in a cooler, and I didn't know this when I first put it in, but I just put the meat in the carcass with a bunch of ice on it, and apparently what you want to do is keep the meat out of the ice and out of the water because it can actually spoil the meat a lot faster. And yeah, here's a picture. This was just a little cabin we're in during the night. That's Ethan, my buddy, and yeah. So now we have some photos from that hunt, and they are a little bit bloody, so if you do not like that, look away. I'll tell you when it's good. Alright, I'm going to the bad photos. But yeah, here's some of the photos. This was us actually gutting the pig. This is when we shot the pig. That's my dad, me, Ethan, and his dad. There's the pig in the back, and then this was actually us skinning the pig, which was it was really difficult, but it was really cool to learn how to do. Alright, you're good. You can look back now. Alright, then we have the wetland bird hunt. This actually I was not able to go on, partially because of the coronavirus, but also because of time and money. Hunting and fishing, it's pretty expensive, and it takes a lot of time, and especially with school and sports and stuff. I had some trouble time managing, so my buddy was able to help me out. Ethan, he went on a duck hunt, and then something he kind of told me that I learned was, so when you're duck hunting, you ambush from blinds. So instead of walking around or trying to stalk after your prey, you actually sit, and again, these blinds that are kind of like this. So you kind of take the existing foliage and you kind of hide out where you are, kind of make your little hideout. And then you duck call or have decoys out. When they fly over, you actually pop up and then you shoot them. But yeah, and then so retrievers are the best kind of dog birds. So with bird hunting, or at least wetland bird hunting, you need a dog to go and retrieve the bird. So let's say you shoot it out and it kind of drops 30-40 yards out in the swamp. It can be pretty difficult to get to, so they use dogs for it, and retrievers are actually known to be the best because they have a super light bite force, so they won't crush the bird. And then as of 2020, all the bird shot can't be lead anymore. So usually bird shot, which is what you hunt with, is a shotgun shell, and it's got a bunch of these little BBs, so when you shoot it, it kind of spreads out in a spread form, so you get kind of a bigger surface area when you hit something. And usually that's little lead BBs, but because it's not so good for the environment, they're changing it so now they can't be lead. So usually what you'll see is little steel BBs. So you might have 15, 20 little steel BBs that are going up. And then here's some more graphic photos. They're not too bad, but yeah, of the duck hunt. So if you don't want to, and then here, hold on. These photos and the ones I'm about to show you are the only photos I did not take. And yeah, here. So close your eyes if you don't want to see this or if you're squeamish. And so here's the duck hunting. There's Ethan with the ducks. There's the little dog. And then here's just the little shelf where they kept some of the shells and other ducks. Cool. And then fishing. So fishing, I did two types of fishing. I did stream fishing and I did lake fishing, which both use the same type of rod. It's about a 7.5-foot rod with about 4-pound test. So the line, it's supposedly rated for 4 pounds. But usually they can take a little more just because I think they want to make sure the rating is a little lower than we can actually take. And so when I was in the streams, I used something called a spinner, which is a piece of tackle. So it's like a little bait almost, but it's a little metal spoon with a hook through it. And when you spin it, when you pull it through the water, it spins and makes kind of little shiny flashes and stuff, so it catches fish's attention. And then in the lake, I used a bobber with some live bait, so a worm, a red worm, or salmon eggs is sometimes we use. And you just drop it out with a bobber, and then it hang maybe 7, 8, 9 feet, and then just wait for a fish to come along and take the bobber out. And then, so it's something that I learned over time, but it's called fishing and not catching, and that's just because when you are fishing, you aren't always successful, and you just kind of have to go about your business thinking like that and kind of dealing with it so you don't find yourself getting too upset. And then, so this is one of those times where we didn't catch anything, but I decided to take out my little cousin, and he actually had a great time, and we went up to a lake just north up in Petaluma, but we didn't really catch anything, but I just thought it'd be kind of a fun photo to add. And then this was, oh yeah, Stampede Reservoir. So this is up north, a little bit north of Clear Lake. This Stampede Reservoir, we actually fished and we caught some kokanee salmon, so that was really cool. And then this is another photo from it, and then this is when we were at the Klamath River. I was actually fishing, and this is one of the instances where I'd use a spinner. And you see with the rod tip down, I can kind of, like the lower you keep the rod tip towards the water, the lower your spinner actually will go in the water. So let's say if I have my rod tip up, is something kind of I learned, is if you keep the rod tip up and you're reeling in your spinner, it's going to kind of float near the surface. But if you keep your rod tip down, the spinner will dive down a little bit, so you can get a little deeper. And then here's some researching some possible recipes. Here's just a little video I made. It's on my Instagram, and I'll show you the link at the end. But here are just some recipes I found, and usually people say, if you can cook, you can read, and I'm not a huge fan of following directions. Plus, like I said before, it's something I thought it'd be kind of fun to kind of mess around and make my own recipes. But yeah, by my final meal, my 9th meal, I was pretty much able to do it all without a recipe, which is pretty cool. And then, cool, shopping. So shopping was a little interesting, especially near the end. It was a little difficult, but I ended up getting 4 shops in, and then just this little run, I forgot a couple things, so I decided to kind of go out and get it. But yeah, some of the stuff I actually couldn't find, so I had to improvise for ingredients. So instead of having like minced garlic in a jar, I would try to find like some garlic powder and then add a little bit of salt to it and a little bit of oil. And then really during quarantine it was limited. Here's just a photo from Trader Joe's that I took, and a lot of stores have just been kind of wiped out, and also limiting the times I'm going to the grocery store and exposing myself, so it's been a little bit difficult, but we've managed. And then so my first meal is the steelhead that we caught at the it was the Klamath River. So steelhead are also known as trout. But yeah, so we got the steelhead, and we actually salt and peppered. So here's a picture actually of me cutting off the heads. But then we got the insides and outsides, and I salt and peppered them and then rolled them in flour so then I could pan fry them. And that's honestly the best way to preserve the taste of the fish. But if you have a fish that's a little less tasteful, then usually you want to spice it up with something more. But yeah, and then so I did that, and then I got some sauteed veggies. I got Brussels sprouts and carrots, tossed in some olive oil, garlic, salt, and pepper, and just kind of mix them around a little bit. And then I just got some white rice. And so I used a rice maker for that, and it actually worked pretty well, and then I garnished it with some parsley. And then meal 2, here's the kokanee salmon from the lake. This was actually one of those things where it had a little bit less flavor, which is why when I seasoned it, I actually, instead of seasoning it with just salt and pepper, I used lemon pepper, so it kind of has like a more kind of citrusy, tart sort of taste, but it actually was really good. And so I did the same thing though. I rolled it in flour, and I was able to pan fry it, and that kind of helped preserve some of that like lemony flavor. Instead of like grilling it or something, it has more of that gristly taste. And so it was really cool. I was able to do some saffron rice, which is just stovetop, but it was nice to change things up. And then I sauteed some broccoli, so I did the same thing I just sauteed the other veggies with. So I put them in a pan, oil, salt, pepper, but I actually put in some soy sauce this time too, so it was kind of like almost a stir-fry sort of taste. And then meal 3 was our wild boar spaghetti. And this one was one of my first meals, and it was kind of the test run of my culminating event meal. Because my culminating event, I was going to do a big bowl of pasta for my coworkers, and this is kind of like a small version of what I was doing. And it actually turned out to be one of the quickest and one of the easiest that I did. But it was super easy. So all you do is heat up some water for the noodles, but actually put in some olive oils to give the noodles a little bit more taste to them. And so I did that, and then as that was cooking, I tossed in some tomato sauce, put a little bit of salt, pepper in it, and then while that was heating up in a saucepan, I cooked up some of the boar, and that was super easy because I have boar and link sausages, and you just cut open the casing and toss it in. And yeah, when you cut open the casing and take it out, it cooks a little faster, and it's a little bit easier to remove than after when it's cooked. And then here's our meal 4. So this is the boar breakfast burrito. This is probably one of my favorites, just because it was something really fun that you could wrap up all on a little tortilla, and it was actually really good too. I was kind of surprised. But yeah, so I cooked the boar halfway. So what I did is I cooked the boar and the peppers together, but I didn't want the peppers to get soggy right away. So I cooked the boar about halfway and then added the peppers in, so they could still kind of introduce the flavor and kind of mix, but they wouldn't really get soggy by the end of it. And then I actually learned how to roll a burrito. I did not know. It's something that was super high in protein because not only do you have the boar, but you have the spinach and the eggs in there too, which is awesome. And then I learned something that I should have done is use a non-stick pan with my eggs, because cleanup, it was very difficult, not fun. And then thinner sliced mushrooms actually cook faster. So I had some that were a little thicker, and here then these were them down there. And I had some that were a little thicker and a little thinner, and the thicker ones didn't really cook in time, or the thinner ones would get really soft and kind of mushy. So that was one thing I needed to at least get consistent, was the slicing. But I've noticed that the thinner ones cook a lot faster. But yeah. And then meal 5 was the venison pizza. This one was pretty cool. Super basic sort of pizza style. You get our dough out, we rolled out the dough, and then what I actually ended up doing was taking a fork and putting little holes in it here and there so the crust wouldn't get super bubbly. And then I actually baked it for about, it was like 5 or 6 minutes, just so it's a little more stiff. And then so when I put the toppings on, not only does it kind of ride easier on there, but because the crust is already partially cooked, when I toss in all like the toppings and stuff and all the greens and stuff, it doesn't get really wilted when I put it back in there and I cook it for longer. So I still have that cooked pizza with kind of a semi-fresh toppings. And yeah. And then, so this is my meal 6, the skinless duck breast. So the skinless duck breast was really cool, but it was kind of difficult because the breasts themselves are super small. But the duck cooks very fast, and the oil tended to like burn, especially around the edges of the meat. So I kind of had to make sure I keep the flame low and constantly kind of move it. And then I sauteed some broccoli with some mushrooms, some onions, and some shredded carrot, and then put all of that on top of some white rice. And then here's the photo of me chopping up some broccoli and mushroom. Here's me doing some of the original sauce that we sauteed this in, which I used olive oil, a little bit of cornstarch, and then soy sauce. And then, yeah, and then this photo is just me cooking it. And then here, I can play it again real quick, was a little slow motion I got of when I poured the sauce, the sauteed sauce from the soy sauce and olive oil and stuff onto it. So that was, I thought it was pretty satisfying. But yeah, and then here's my 7th meal. This is the skin-on duck breast. So this one actually probably turned out to be one of my best looking dishes. And this one I actually cooked, and one thing I learned is cook with the skin up. At least first start with cooking the skin up, because as the fat and the skin melts, it actually kind of melts all those flavors back into the duck. So if you had the skin down, yes, you wouldn't really burn the meat, which you're not trying to do, but it could prevent that. But also you would lose all those juices, they kind of just flow at the bottom. So then I added with my veggies after I had the cooked, I tossed the potatoes actually in the oven. And so oven roasted potatoes, and then I got the small golden onions and the spinach, and I tossed that with salt, pepper, and actually a little bit of maple syrup, so again, I gave it a maple glaze, and then I tossed that onto a plate and took a picture, and it looked pretty good. But here's the duck breast before I cooked it, and then here's just me cooking it. I didn't really get a super good picture of that, but that was the only one I had, so I just kind of used that. And then meal 8 was the pork chops and glazed apples. This is probably I think the glazed apples were my favorite part of this entire project, just because I didn't know I could make something that good, and it was so easy too. So with the pork itself, what I ended up doing is searing it in the oven. So I turned the oven to about 500 degrees, and I seared it really fast. So a couple minutes, it was like a minute or two on each side. Sear the outside to keep all the juices locked inside. And then I actually brought it outside to the grill. So this is me searing it, and then I brought it outside to the grill and cooked it the rest of the way there. So you kind of get that grill gristle a little bit, and it was a little nicer. And then I actually used, so when I got the apple slices, I actually tossed them in a pan, and then I sprinkled some brown sugar on top of the apple slices, and then let them cook, and then kept flipping them until the apple slices actually absorbed all the brown sugar, and they were super mushy and super sweet and super good. And then I just had some mashed potatoes that I cut up, something super easy and that I didn't do unfortunately, but I've learned later now. My potatoes and my timing was really off because the potato chunks I used, I cut them in half, so they took super long to cook because I was going to mash them up. But what I've learned is that the smaller I cut the potatoes, the faster it will cook, so I can kind of get my dish on time. And then I just got some sauteed spinach, which is the same as what I'm doing for, I think it's the next meal, but it's just spinach and oil and garlic in a pan and just saute it, and it cooks down really fast. And then meal 9. So this is my final meal. This was supposed to be my culminating event thing I was thinking of doing and bringing in a big bowl of pasta, but then I changed it up because I knew I already did pasta and I didn't want to just recreate that just for my dad because my mom and sister are vegan. So what I decided to do is kind of change it up and do like a braised venison soup. So what that kind of consisted of, I got a big venison steak and I actually cut off all the bone and all the fat, which is something that I didn't really think of at first, but I was researching online and they said it can just really help when you are eating it. You're not just eating big pieces of fat connected to the meat, and it's just a lot more consistent and nice. So I removed that, and then here are all of my ingredients. And yeah, it was pretty interesting actually. So the way it was cooked was kind of weird. So I got a big Dutch oven, and so what I did is put oil and garlic in it and then tossed my meat cubes in there. So I braised it around. I probably braised them for, I think it was about 10 minutes. And then I actually took them out, and there was a bunch of kind of stuff crusted to the bottom. So what I learned was this white wine trick, where if you pour white wine and then you take like a fork and scrape the bottom, it actually uplifts all that stuff, but then can make that part of the stew so you keep all the flavor. So I thought that was kind of cool. And then so once I take the meat out and I use that white wine to get all the stuff off the bottom, I tossed in all my onions, my potatoes, my carrots, and garlic and stuff like that, and my mushrooms. So those all got to get to slow cook for about 35 minutes. And then I ended up adding all my meat back in, and then I added the chicken stock and a little bit of vinegar and some tomatoes and a little bit of parsley and oregano and stuff like that into it, and then let that simmer for about 60 minutes. So it was kind of nice because at that point it was a little less labor intensive, except every 10 to 15 minutes I want to come and kind of stir it. But it's interesting to see all of the ingredients in there, like the potatoes and the mushrooms and the meat and all that stuff kind of cooked down, and for it to become more of like a soup. And yeah, and then here's just me and my dad eating it because my mom and sister couldn't. So I kind of shared with him. I was planning to like make my culminating event, really with the whole family, but it ended up just being me and him, which is all right. And then here are just some extra photos of my meats. Here are the duck breast, here's some pork chops, here's some deer sausage, here's some more venison and pork sausage, and then here are some of my deer chops, the venison chops. So when I say venison, that's deer, but this is some more of the deer chops, and then here's just some more meat in the freezer. And then cleanup. Cleanup's one thing that I didn't really intend for, but it comes with cooking, and it's something that I kind of remembered in the end, but it's something that's you can't cook without cleanup because then you don't have clean stuff to cook with next time. So, and then here are some of my challenges and adaptions for COVID-19. So one of the challenges is like groceries became kind of scarce, and you've definitely seen this photo at Trader Joe's. If I wanted to get some stuff to garnish my stuff with, or onions, potatoes, certain like tomatoes, pizza sauce was out of time, so that was kind of difficult. So my culminating event for Trader Joe's had to be canceled. I was planning on bringing them a big old bowl, but I really couldn't. I haven't been working since the start of the quarantine, so I haven't even been there. And then not every time you go out will be successful. That's another thing I learned, and it was kind of hard with hunting and fishing alike, is that no matter how hard you try, not every time you're going to be successful when you go hunting or fishing. So you just kind of have to keep that in the back of your mind and try to have fun while doing it, even if you're not really catching anything. And then another thing I kind of wanted to do was poke pulling. So poke pulling was something I'd get like a Dungeness crab or some rockfish that I would try to do something with, maybe like fish tacos I was thinking, but I wasn't able to do with the quarantine. But poke pulling, what it is, it's a long, so what you do is I've been before, but only once, and we didn't catch anything, so I kind of want to try it again. But it's this long bamboo pole, and you tie on like a little wire leader, so about a foot of wire under it, and then a big hook, big circular hook, and then you put some squid on it, and then you go out to like Bolinas and you shove it down in the rocks, and when it's down there you kind of move it around and stuff, and the crabs and rockfish will actually grab onto it and you can kind of pull them out. So I thought that'd be kind of cool, but then quarantine said no to that. And then yeah, here's some of my bonus content. I thought it'd be kind of fun to add. I just went to my friend's house, and it was Ethan's house again, and he was cooking up some geese too. So then I couldn't really make a full meal out of it, but I'm like, hey, why not? I'll learn how to cook geese and see how it is. And It was very interesting. It was really similar to steak, actually, a lot more similar than you'd think duck would be. And it was quite interesting because the duck and the geese were a lot more like, it was a lot more like cooking a steak. It was like I was cooking red meat. It didn't seem like a chicken or a turkey, which I thought was super interesting. But then here is the goose breast. There was me cooking it. That was kind of the end. And then here's just a photo of the first day I was hunting. It was actually before it snowed, and I just thought that was a funny photo my dad got of me. And this is kind of like the blind we were making at the time. And thank you. That's it.